Back for round two. My dog's inside, so I'm not a bad pet owner, but you'll probably hear her drinking a lot. Oh, and I'm not sure if I explained. Today we're in my office, um, and just again mix it up a bit. So now we're going to end our last content. I promise, I've been saying this all like 2 weeks. I promise this is it. Last content that we need to be ready for the DBQ exam is isolationism and the road to World War II. So we don't need to, even though it goes 1945, we're not going to have anything about World War II. At least I hope not. We never do anything about war, but we need to know what leads up to the war. So, this is the notes, isolationism. I'm not sure if you can see that. Isolationism and the road to World War II. That's where we're going to talk with today. So first we have to think about, because this is kind of weird, we ended World War I in 1919. We did not sign the Treaty of Versailles, and we didn't sign it because we did not want to be a part of the League of Nations. And we didn't want to be a part of the League of Nations because we did not want to sign agreements that if other nations went to war, we had to go to war with them. So that's what we're looking at. 1945 is going to end before, we're not going to get to the establishment of NATO, but it's essentially what NATO is, right? We are a member of NATO. So if someone attacks Great Britain tomorrow, we're at war. That's what NATO means. If somebody attacks Germany, we go to war to protect Germany. And the United States in 1919 said, we are not signing up for that. We are not being a part of a League of Nations that requires us as the United States to exert any kind of military presence or obligations financially to the rest of the world. We are going to isolate ourselves. And I like to say isolate and insulate, right? We're going to turn inward, and then we're going to put a big barrier around us and say, leave us alone, stay out. We're never, ever, ever doing that again. We do. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. All right, bear with me because I just realized I have not read through these notes before I sat down, which is a bad mistake. And I'm already 2 minutes into this, so I'm not going to start it over. So bear with me as I go through these unprepared. Sorry. Okay, I think I did the first paragraph pretty well. That we are, again, trying to stay out of the League of Nations. We don't participate in the League of Nations. And because we don't participate in the League of Nations, it's weak. The League of Nations never has any clout. Again, I'm using that word that you guys think is hilarious. They have no clout. They have no strong sense of being able to achieve anything because the United States isn't part of it. And the reason that's important is after World War I, United States is economic superpower, political superpower, not military. We're not there yet. That's not achieved until after World War II. But we're an economic superpower and a political superpower. As much as it hates and pains me to say it, it is because of Woodrow Wilson. And you know why it pains me to say that. So how do we isolate ourselves? How do we prevent war again? And one of the ways that we're going to do that is with all of these disarmament treaties and pacts. And I think we did a little bit of that in the 20s. I'm going to run through them really quickly. Again, the disarmament conference, again, that's about, and if you want to write to the side, that disarmament is about battleships, right? You got 5 battleships, you get 5 battleships, you get 2.5 battleships. And now, of course, you're going to say, how do I get 2.5 battleships? Well, you got to wait for me to build 10, because then you'll get, if I really have 5, you really get 2, because you got to wait for me to build 5 more before you get that other half. So really, I'm going to have 10, and you're going to have 3. Does that make sense? I can even do that math. Also on that first page is the ever popular, if you remember from AP Euro, Kellogg-Briand Pact. I love this one. This is one of my favorites. And what it says is war is illegal unless you are attacked. 62 nations sign a pact that says war is illegal. I'm not sure what they were thinking, because how do you enforce that? How do you enforce that? You can't. And probably the most important part of that is it gives D3, a false sense of security. War is outlawed. Nobody's going to make war. It's outlawed. Seriously, people. That just always, I don't understand that one at all. You should look up the pictures of the Kellogg-Briand Pact. All those men in their suits signing these papers like they're doing something awesome and great. It's not. It's crazy. The bottom of the page, U.S. largest creditor. We lent a lot of people money, which again is going to be one of the reasons that we get to the Great Depression. Please make sure, I don't think I noted it. It is important to note with the Great Depression that it was a global depression. That Great Depression starts in Europe before us, and it is global. It's not just the United States. It's a horrific depression. Allies can't pay back. Germany can't pay back its money. We restructure that. Again, we get the Great Depression. Again, we're not going to go over that. On page 2, American foreign policies in the 1930s. And the first one is called the Good Neighbor Act. And when you see the Good Neighbor Act, your little brain should think, I wonder if it really is. Good Neighbor Act is with Latin America. We've never been a good neighbor with Latin America. We're going to try to change that. U.S. troops are going to be removed. That's one positive thing that FDR does. All those presidents starting in about 1915 up to about 1925, they are putting troops everywhere in Latin America. And FDR says, we're going to remove those. Our oil crisis with Mexico is solved peacefully. Clark memorandum during Coolidge's president, the United States will not intervene. And 2, policy essentially a reaction to overseas aggression. And we're not going to do that any longer. FDR is a popular figure in Latin America. And he is widely viewed as a good president in Latin America for the relationship between Latin America and the United States. Secretary Cordell Hull, no state has the right to intervene in the internal or external affairs of another, recommended that tariffs will be lowered. The United States is going to withdraw from Nicaragua in 1932. The Marines are going to come out of Haiti and Cuba. And in 1934, first time since 1915, I would draw a line to that there are no United States troops in Latin America. Another positive effect of FDR. So he's removing troops. U.S. agreed to admit all disputes to arbitration. And again, arbitration means we're going to sit down with a mediator and talk things out. And again, that's positive. So on page 3, London Economic Conference. You need to put a big box around this because this is a crucial time period in the history of the world, not just the history of the United States. It's twofold. It's really important because it's an economic conference. Oh, good grief, what just happened? Okay, I don't know what just happened. It's an economic conference, and it is also a political referendum that we'll see that haunts World War II. I don't know what just happened, like all that freeze frame. I don't know if that really happened or I just saw it, but I'm sorry. So, London Economic Conference. It's one of those times in history where the name of this, the Economic Conference, is not the most important thing. Attended by 66 nations, confront the global depression. FDR undermines it because I'm not going to go back on the gold standard. We're not going to do it. But the most important thing is for gigantic box around that. 2 people are going to have really different interpretations of this. A little guy named Hitler and a little guy named Mussolini. And what they say is the United States is not going to intervene in Europe. They aren't going to do anything. And that is a crucial, important part of the road to World War II. Hitler knows the United States doesn't care anymore. They are isolating themselves, and they weren't kidding. They're not going to do anything to help us. Mussolini, not going to do anything, and that's important. We reduced tariffs, and again, that reduction of tariffs is always a positive thing, aimed at relief and recovery, part of the Good Neighbor policy, reverse the high tariff policy, and pave the way for U.S. free trade. C2, by 1939, Hull successfully negotiated pacts with 21 countries. U.S. trade increases, relationships with Latin America improve. The bottom of page 3 is always very controversial. Again, we're in U.S. history, so we don't talk much about the Russian Revolution. But in 1917, Russia begins its revolution, and it changes into the USSR, the Soviet Union. They are a communist country. Their government is communist. In 1933, the United States recognizes the Soviet Union, the United Soviet Socialist Republics. We recognize them as a country. Soviet Union had already received recognition from everybody else. FDR believed recognition of Moscow might bolster USSR against Japan. That's an important part of this as well. Americans want to trade with the Soviet Union, and so we recognize them, their right to exist. They're a country, so okay. The Philippines islands to become free after a 10-year period. And that will be an important part. Now, we're going to forget that Philippines part. That's the part where I should have read my notes first. We're moving straight down to number 4. And this again, on page 4, Roman numeral 3, big giant underline box, failure of collective security. This is the failure that leads us to World War II. It is the rise of totalitarian regimes. And that again is 2 people. Fascism, Mussolini, and again, for those of you that can't remember or weren't part of AP Euro, Mussolini makes that word up, fascist. It's a made-up word. It's the glorification, again, of Romans, etc. We have a Japanese dictatorship, and then Adolf Hitler, and then communism, which is going to be. So in 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. Why? Oil. Japan needs oil. So they invade Manchuria against the League of Nations, right? Because war is illegal. Problem is, nobody can do anything. So B1C, what does Japan do? Okay, we'll just withdraw from the League of Nations. And that is, again, the powerless part of the League of Nations. And it is the part that the United States recognized by not joining. Like, there's no power in this thing. So they withdraw from the League of Nations. Sorry, we'll just quit. Reasons for Japanese aggression. And they need material. They need coal. They live on an island. They don't have natural resources. So importantly, they need coal, oil, and iron. And then the secondary part is space for their population. The United States is doing everything they can to prevent them from getting oil. And that is why December 7th, when we talk about a surprise attack, it's not a surprise that we were attacked. We were going to be attacked. The surprise was the time and the place. That's the only thing we didn't know. We were doing everything possible to disrupt and hinder the Japanese and their quest for oil and all the other resources. Wanted to open new markets. I'm on page 5. Anger at the U.S. for Japan's given unequal status. In 1934, ended the naval treaty, started massive naval buildup. And in 1940, they signed the it's really the Iron Pact with Berlin and Tokyo. So it's bad. 1935, Italy invades Ethiopia. My AP Euro people should remember why Italy invaded Ethiopia. Think. Yeah, because in the scramble for Africa, the only African nation that was able to defend itself was Ethiopia against Italy. So Mussolini wanted revenge and takes Ethiopia back. Again, in the middle of that page 5, American isolationism in the face of fascists. Americans concerned with their own economic depression. We ain't got time for that. We're not alarmed at totalitarianism. Again, that's Europe. You guys figure that out. It's not us. And nobody's really paying any attention. The bottom of the page is another reason. That's called the Nye, like as in Bill Nye the Science Guy, but it's not him. And it is this oversight of Congress that really is not factual. Many believe the U.S. entered the war so people could make money. And that's a bad thing. That's a horrible thing to think that a country goes to war so it can make money. And many people believed it. It wasn't true. Obviously, it wasn't true. It's very flawed. But it gives us to what we're going to be looking at these next couple of pages is neutrality. So on page 6, you see the Neutrality Acts of 1935, 1936, 1937. We are neutral. We're a neutral country. We are not participating in any of these. So prohibited the sale of arms to belligerent nations. A belligerent nation is a nation that's attacked someone. Prohibited loans to belligerent nations. Forbid Americans to travel on vessels at nations at war. So you couldn't travel on an Italian vessel. Non-military goods must be purchased on a cash and carry. So just like you, if you've ever been to one of those sales, cash and carry, you got to pay me cash right now and you got to take it right now. I'm not delivering it. You're not going to place an order. Cash, deliver. Banned involvement in the Spanish Civil War, which we're getting ready to talk about. Limited options of president in crisis. And number 3 is very important. America declined to build up its armed forces where it could deter aggressors. We're not building up anything. We're going to reduce. Navy declined. Army's going to decline. We're not going to build a military that requires tax dollars in the middle of a Great Depression. So that, again, is something that will be important come 1941. Spanish Civil War, not going to talk a lot about this, but it is important to note that, excuse me, again, my awesome cup. Spanish Civil War happens. Hitler uses it to perfect some of his military strategies, his attack strategies. And then at the bottom of that page, Japan launches a full attack on China. And again, he's in China looking for oil. Trying again to increase the power of Japan. On page 7, please put a box around 3. This is Roosevelt's quarantine speech, another famous speech by Roosevelt, condemning Japan and Ethiopia for their Italy for their aggressive actions, urged democracies to quarantine the aggressors by economic embargoes. So how is one way that we can show our displeasure? Economically, we're going to sanction them. And that works if everyone agrees to that, right? If everyone agrees to the sanctions, it works. In a post-World War II and Cold War, those economic sanctions have been very, very powerful as ways to avoid war. They have been used with great success. In 1937, not going to be used because not everyone's going to fall in line with them. Criticized by isolationists, fearing that FDR would lead us into war. And again, it's not something that is going to work very well. Again, on page 7, German aggression. Germany is moving into Austria. Germany is moving into Czechoslovakia. And Germany is going to withdraw from the League of Nations. We're going to withdraw too because we're not going to abide by those. Withdraws from the Treaty of Versailles. And Germany is going to get Austria. Prime Minister at the time is Neville Chamberlain. And we go to this Munich conference. And again, this idea of appeasement, like just give it in to the aggressor, give in to the bully, give him what he wants. If he gets what he wants, he'll stop. And we know that's not true. Germany is going to take Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, which is a German-speaking province. And then on World War I is going to begin September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland. So Hitler's going to invade Poland. And war will be declared September 1st. We really don't do anything in Europe from September 1st until really spring of next year, until 1940. It's kind of called the phony war in between that time. What we're doing is another Neutrality Act in 1939. Britain and France desperately need U.S. airplanes, and so we have to redo that. So September 5th, FDR proclaims U.S. neutrality, but not neutral in thought. And we start allowing people to buy our stuff. So sale of weapons to Europe, democracies, cash and carry. So, that was a side eye. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that. Cash and carry basis. So if you had the cash, you could buy them, take them with you. We're not going to loan you money. We're not going to have debts because of this. We then get into the business of selling war machines to Europe, mostly Great Britain. So on page 10, German expansion in April 1940, when it begins again in Denmark, the war will begin. France is going to fall in 1940. We've got the Battle of Britain. Again, you can read all these. This is not stuff that will be asked about. On page 11, U.S. response to the war in Europe. This is December 29th, 1939. The arsenal of democracy, and an arsenal is weapons. What am I at? I'm at 20 minutes, right? Proclaimed U.S. could not remain neutral. Nazi is the game of world domination. This, again, really is the beginning of the United States participating in World War II, even though we don't have boots on the ground. And now we become the great warehouse of the Allies. We're just going to make all kinds. Note again, this is when we come out of the Great Depression. U.S. response to the fall of France and the Battle of Britain. We're going to have to fight a war. Again, we feel like we're going to have to do that. FDR calls on America to build a huge Air Force and a 2-ocean Navy. $37 billion. In September 1940, Selective Service again, Training Act. And again, we're gearing up because essentially we understand that at some point we probably are going to have to go to war. On page 12, I almost put that down. We do have some isolationists. Please put a box around that. America First Committee. England will fight to the last American. Like, nope, we're not getting in there. We're not doing that. One of the largest visible people as part of that is Charles Lindbergh. And in the election of 1940, Republicans nominate Wendell Willkie. Can you imagine if we had a president named Wendell Willkie? I can't. So thankfully, FDR defeated him so that we didn't have President Wendell Willkie. Sounds like a nursery rhyme. And again, a little bit closer, but FDR wins. He has now been elected to his 4th term. Again, we don't have a constitutional amendment yet. The reason we have that constitutional amendment is because of FDR. So we get our 4 Freedoms speech. Again, another important speech by FDR. 4 Freedoms. And those 4 freedoms are on the top of page 13. Again, I would make a mark by that. Any of you that are really familiar with iconic American art know Norman Rockwell, and this is the 4 freedoms goes with that. It was on the cover of Saturday Evening Post. It's a man, like a grandpa and a grandma putting a big fat turkey on a table. I actually think if you're a Modern Family viewer, they did. Alex did a project about this. This is the 4 freedoms. Look it up when we're done. Norman Rockwell, 4 freedoms. I know you've seen it before. And those 4 freedoms are speech and expression, religion, and the 2 important ones, freedom from want. This is coming after the Great Depression, and freedom from fear. This is, again, the fear that's happening in Europe. So on page 13, the most important thing out of this whole thing that we've been talking about is on page 14. It's called the Lend-Lease Program, and it starts in April 1941. We haven't entered the war yet. We haven't participated. And this is going to be, again, considered one of the most monumentous laws ever passed by Congress. And here are the provisions. Authorize President to give military supplies to any nation he deemed vital to the defense of the U.S. That is a huge power to give to the president. Giving military equipment and supplies to whomever the president felt. That is really a lot of power. And it's really circumventing the power of Congress that they did themselves with the act of declaring war. So British are going to buy lots of stuff. Counts could be settled after the war. Again, now we get rid of that cash and carry. You can pay us later. But take it now, pay us later. Again, lots of criticisms. Isolationists, getting us closer into war, but the result is 4A. It ends our neutrality. We are no longer neutral. We have an economic declaration of war against Germany. U.S. war production immediately increases, again getting us out of the Great Depression. And 4C, Hitler starts sinking our ships. Now, Hitler starts sinking our ships. We don't ever declare war on Germany. Germany declares war on us. We don't declare war on Germany. And it is important, again, that they are sinking our ships. By war's end, the United States had given $50 billion worth of arms and equipment to Britain and the Soviet Union. We start patrolling the Western Atlantic. On page 14, let me see how long I've got. Gosh, you guys are going to have to listen to me a lot today. On page 14, in the middle of the page, gigantic box around the Atlantic Charter. Now, I have to tell you this. FDR and Winston Churchill are great friends. They're kind of essentially the same people. Probably alcoholics. They drank all day long, smoked all day long, both products of wealth, in charge of their countries, and they were great friends. And they talked with each other often. But this Atlantic Conference and the Atlantic Charter happens in August 1941, and it is really important. It's a secret meeting between FDR and Churchill off of the coast of Newfoundland, which is why it's called the Atlantic Charter, and it's secret. And you need to put a box around it because you need to know these things if something like this comes up. Accepted by FDR and Churchill and endorsed by Stalin later. Stalin is now the leader of the Soviet Union. No territorial changes contrary to the wishes. We aren't doing what we did after World War I and drawing up new maps. Nothing like that's going to happen. Governments abolished by dictators. And number 4 is important. This is the thing that Wilson really wanted, a permanent system of general security, and that's the creation of the United Nations, of the UN. The UN is created by Winston Churchill, FDR, in the middle of the Atlantic in 1941. Again, an essential thing. Escalations with Japan, again, on page 15, Japan outlined proposed Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Again, we don't want any of that. On page 15, number 3, embargo of 1940 passed by Congress against Japan. And that embargo says, 3B, please make sure you see what that is. U.S. had placed an embargo on export of aviation gasolines, lubricants, scrap iron, and steel to Japan. We aren't selling any of that stuff to Japan. We're not going to sell you oil, iron, scrap iron. We're not selling you anything. And then in December, it goes into include iron ore, pig iron, chemicals, machines. We put an embargo on Japan buying anything from us. And that's what makes Japan very mad. In 1941, FDR moves U.S. fleet from West Coast to Pearl Harbor. Not a good idea. And the embargo of 1941, Japan, U.S. will freeze, please look at 6B. U.S. froze Japanese assets in the U.S. So if Japan, the nation of Japan, or corporations, high rollers had money in the United States, we froze their assets. You can't get your money out. Sorry, we got your money. Again, makes them mad. Closed Panama Canal. You can't go through the Panama Canal, Japan. Placed embargo of export of oil and other vital. We tell everybody else, don't export oil to Japan. And again, gosh, I don't know what happens there. Okay. So now we go to negotiations. And this is the part that most people don't really have a good knowledge about. That we were in negotiations with Japan about this. Japan offered to withdraw from Indochina if we would resume economic relations. Japan wants China. They really want China. U.S. demanded the Japanese to withdraw from Indochina, promised not to attack. We can't reach an agreement. Negotiations on an attempt for U.S. to buy Philippines. Nope. Japan decided if no agreement by November 25th, Japan would attack the United States. We knew that. We knew that. We knew that that was going to happen. On the top of page 16, Japanese decision to attack. Again, we're talking December 1st, nothing happens, and felt war was inevitable. And that this, again, a surprise attack would cripple. And again, it's only a surprise because of the date and the place. We knew this was going to happen. So, attack on Pearl Harbor would destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet, and it almost did that. Almost did that. U.S. experts had cracked the top code of the Japanese. We had cracked their code. We had expected Japan to attack in the Dutch East Indies and Malaya, and that did not happen. Evidence that FDR knew about Pearl Harbor, we don't know that. Like that, we knew we were going to get attacked, but we thought that it was going to be closer to Japanese holdings. That's far away, and that's part of it. So December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor is attacked. Japan sank or badly damaged battleships, Oklahoma and Arizona, 10 other ships. 2,500 Americans will be killed. 3 aircraft carriers will escape destruction because they were out doing maneuvers. And December 8th, Roosevelt asks for a declaration of war against Japan, a day that will end in infamy. Now, we declare war on Japan, nothing about Germany. Germany and Italy will declare war on the United States 3 days later. And again, Hitler's third fatal blunder. Germany didn't have to declare war on the U.S., but because he did, FDR and Churchill agreed to defeat Germany first. And so instead of us focusing on the war in the Pacific first, we go back and focus on Europe. And we increase to 12 million. So that takes us through the end of our lecture. And that's our last APUSH lecture. And that makes me, I'm sure that makes you happy. It makes me a little bit happy and it makes me a little bit sad that we have to do it this way. And I, again, hate that we're doing it like this. It makes me so sad. But anyway, we're done with content. So that's a happy thing. No more lectures from Mrs. Norris. That's a happy thing. And so Friday, you'll test over this. It'll be a quiz, just like our normal quizzes. It will be longer. Like it won't be like those, 10-minute quizzes. It'll be a longer quiz that is going to be the 1920s, the Great Depression, and road to World War II. So make sure you've got all of those knowledge. I'll probably throw in some World War II things because we didn't really test over that. World War I things because we didn't really test over that. So it will be a quiz. You need to take it on Friday because I'm not going to let that hang out that long. You need to take it on Friday and get that done. And then Monday, we'll start again with review. We'll probably have 2 things that we'll do every day. Some kind of content review and some kind of writing thing that we'll be doing regularly, okay? All right, as always, let me know if you have questions, and happy last lecture. And I guess it might be a good thing that these are recorded because you can just go back and, especially this one, I think I had a lot of weird things happen in this one. So anyway, goodbye. I'll see you on Friday.